if you're out of stock, it's kind of like being in a car crash. You see the immediate impact. You have someone who wants to buy something, you can't fill it, you're losing sales. But when you have excess inventory, it's almost like cancer. You don't really notice it, but it's eroding your business slowly and slowly and slowly. And then by the time you notice it, it's too late.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you illuminating conversations from impactful leaders in business and our communities. Today, we've got my good friend, Walid Nasserdeen. He's the Managing Director at W.NDeen Advisory and a CPG Operations Advisor, and he's going to tell us all about what that means. Glad to have you with us, Walid.
Hey, buddy. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you here. So for everyone watching, hit like, comment, and share so we can bring these game-changing ideas to as many people as possible. And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss any of our other upcoming conversations with trailblazing leaders like Walid. So let's get into it. What's the inside scoop on the CPG industry? What is it? And can you break down what it means to be a CPG Operations Advisor and how you're transforming your clients' results?
Yeah, it's funny. CPG is a pretty common term, but it's not widely known. It basically stands for consumer packaged goods. So think of like consumer goods. Basically, the easiest way to put it is anything you would see in a grocery store. So shampoos, drinks, food and beverage, anything that comes in a package retail ready that you would see in a grocery store, a 7-Eleven, that's basically CPG. And so I work in supply chain operations, but I specialize in that industry. So basically any company that purchases product, makes product, holds inventory, that's what I specialize in.
Awesome. So what was the aha moment that led you into this field? Was there a turning point that pushed you in this direction?
Yes, it's funny. So 2020 always makes you went through things you didn't think of what they were, and then you kind of look back and you notice they really made an impact. So my parents were actually entrepreneurs. And so when I was in high school, they had this little retail shop. And I remember, always seeing working in the store, we would be out of stock on all the items that everybody wanted. And then all the items that no one wanted, we basically had a warehouse in the back, just inventory of stuff. And so I never really understood that business model. Like, why do we have so much product, but we're not selling anything? We're always out of stock. And again, I didn't really think about it. And my background was finance. So I went through finance, analytics, ex-Wall Streeter. And then through the M&A scene, basically became an operator. We're looking at companies, looking at the health. And when it came to the CPG and consumer good brands, I started to notice, even at the highest levels of companies, they were having that same issue. The products that everybody wanted, they were always out of stock. And the products that nobody wanted, they basically had warehouses full of stuff. And so when you're talking about larger companies, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars of products that are just sitting there doing nothing, tying up cash. And then when you get into CPG, like food and beverage, a lot of the time you have expiration dates that are tied to that. So you'd have these giant companies that would basically just be spending millions of dollars tying up stuff, and then at the worst case scenario, ending up just throwing it away. And so as I got into operations, as I started seeing like the value add I could have as an operator, that's kind of where I started specializing and focusing on.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is mismatches between supply and demand, right? Kind of economics 101 kind of stuff. So how do you actually plan for shifts in demand? What's the secret sauce to staying ahead of these things?
So there really isn't a secret sauce. The secret sauce is basically, as you mentioned, understanding the actual economic theory of things. A lot of times what happens is the way it works basically is you have four heads of the company. You have a finance team, you have a sales team, you have a marketing team, and you have an operations team. So what happens is in most companies, the sales and leadership team are driving the actual operations and marketing. So what happens is sales and marketing are always going to be overly optimistic, right? They think every commercial they're running is going to be amazing. Sales thinks every time they talk to a customer, Walmart, Costco, they're going to roll out and wipe the inventory clean. So what happens is they're basing a lot of assumptions on basically conversations they're having, just basically gut feelings. And you can't really plan that way. So the way we work, and then finance is always going to be conservative, right? Finance is like, we got to pay for this stuff. And then same thing for operations. They're always like, we got to buy the materials, we got labor, we need how much line time we have. And so basically what I'm doing like you mentioned, is just economic theory. It's matching the supply and demand. It's basically taking the conversations that sales and marketing are having and their expectations, but aren't reality. And then looking at the actual market, the history of sales, and what's going on in the actual marketplace, and getting everybody together to have like a realistic expectation, and then making that decision.
Well,
So
we
the
love
secret sauce is communication, if that to answer your question.
yeah, we love seeing everybody who should be talking together and working together actually doing those things, right?
Exactly.
So, uh, you are a certified professional forecaster, and that sounds a little bit intense on how you get there. What does it take to get that title? How has it changed the game for you and your clients?
Yeah, so it's a designation for forecasting. It's kind of like how a finance person would have a CPF, or a accountant would have a CPA. Similar process, 3 years, three tests, each one getting a little higher in um, difficulty. My master's was in econometrics, MBA in economics and statistics. So I leveraged a lot of that. But I was lucky enough that I actually had been in the industry for 10 years before I took this designation test. So it was just a lot of doing what I've been practicing for the last 10 years. So it actually wasn't that difficult, which to me was a good sign, because it means that what I've been doing in my career is what the industry standard had always expected. So
Yeah, it sounds like if you understand the principles involved and stay current on the new research and apply all that in a rational way, that it's going to help you be much more successful.
absolutely.
So
And I think you would understand that when it comes to things like this, there's strategy, there's theory, but then there's execution. So the best understanding of this is basically like, yeah, understanding the economic theory, understanding what that looks like in strategy and principle, but then actually how do you get people to talk to each other, communicate, and actually execute according to plan.
I love that. I love when we talk about turning strategy into action, especially when it involves leading people and communicating with people. What's
Absolutely.
the number one pitfall you see small businesses falling into with demand planning, and how do you get them back on track?
Well, the number one issue that most smaller brands don't really see as an issue is the excess inventory part of it. So what happens is it's very much a risk management sales approach, where I would rather have the inventory and not need it than need it and not have it. So what happens is they'll go out, they'll have a conversation, they'll get super excited about a conference they went to, or a trade show. They start talking to buyers. They have a bunch of conversations. They start buying inventory and filling up warehouses for all these expected sales to come through. And then sometimes that stuff just doesn't materialize. And so what happens is they're sitting on a bunch of inventory. And again, to them, they don't really see the risk. They're like, well, at least I have it for when I could sell it. But a lot of times when you're a smaller brand, you're limited resources. So that $100,000, $200,000 that's tied up in inventory is $100,000 that they can't spend on advertising, on marketing, on buying shelf space, on hiring people. So it really ties up their cash so they can't make the decisions they need to. When you're a smaller brand, resource management is critical. So tying up cash and not having cash coming in. And then again, if you're talking about CPG, this stuff could expire. There's expiration dates. There's things like that. Sometimes you're dealing with ice cream where the warehouse has to be cold. So that's an exorbitant expense right there. So it's just the risk management, the resource management, and the getting overly excited every time there's a opportunity.
Yeah, it's a very real thing. I was watching a Shark Tank the other night, and one of the people pitching had $1 million in inventory and didn't have any money to spend on marketing to try to sell that inventory, because they got themselves in a bind purchasing all that inventory ahead of time. So it's a very real thing. It can be crippling to a business to get yourself wrapped up in that.
Yeah, and the problem is, to your point though, why it's such a I guess a thing that they don't think about is because it's not an immediate impact to their business, right? The way I like to put it is, if you're out of stock, it's kind of like being in a car crash. You see the immediate impact. You have someone who wants to buy something, you can't fill it, you're losing sales. But when you have excess inventory, it's almost like cancer. You don't really notice it, but it's eroding your business slowly and slowly and slowly. And then by the time you notice it, it's too late.
Yeah, it definitely pays to think long term about your strategy. Yes, you've got to deal with the car crash when it comes along, but you have to think about, what if we get this cancer as well, right? Strategic pivots can make or break a business. What's your advice for leaders, CEOs, COOs, to make strategy updates that actually stick, especially in light of what we talked about with the sales and the marketing folks?
Yeah, so in our industry, the highest level of demand, what's called demand planning, which is basically forecasting and inventory management. The highest level of that is called S&OP, so sales and operations planning. And basically, the assumption is, in business, you're going to have a certain level of forecast. People say forecast is a very generic term, but you have financial forecasts that maybe the board is putting out to Wall Street. So you have these financial forecasts for the company as a whole. You have sales forecasts coming from the sales team. You have marketing plans and forecasts coming from the marketing team. And then you have operational forecasts, which are, how much products we're making, how much line time do we have, how many people are we hiring. And it's actually quite a shame, even in the largest companies, these forecasts are rarely ever reconciled against each other. Typically what happens is they'll just take the top line forecast that whatever leadership is putting, and they'll peanut butter spread and force everybody else to kind of follow that. There's no real checks and balances. So the best way to pivot is, I put it like a sports team. You have to have strong offense, but you also have to have strong defense. And so checks and balances processes, things like the SOP meeting, where it's a monthly meeting every month with the executives from finance, operations, marketing, senior leadership, where they're all looking at the data, they're all looking at the decisions that need to be made. And it's not a very short-term vision. It's usually 6 to 12 months out, sometimes more than a year. So it's basically getting everybody at the leadership level to see what's going on at the day-to-day, but then take that information and plan out accordingly for long-term. And to me, that's the best way for brands to start really having everybody holding hands. So when things happen and they need to pivot, it's not a surprise. Everybody's on the same page holding hands, and they're managing their business the way it should be.
It reminds me a lot of flying an airplane on instruments when you can't see any landmarks or any horizon reference out of the cockpit, and they teach us to what's called an instrument cross check, where you're looking at the altimeter, you're looking at the artificial horizon, you're looking at all your different instruments to make sure they're telling you the same story, because that means you're flying straight and level. You're flying the way you want to be flying, as opposed to if all those instruments are telling you a different story, you could be in a bad attitude, you could be headed to the ground, you could be stalling, you could be doing all these things. So it sounds a lot like that, as everybody needs to be on the same page, and leadership needs to be cross-checking to make sure everybody's sticking to the plan and is aware of the plan.
Well, it's not only that, but the truth is, and it's understandable why this problem happens, because the truth is everybody's kind of speaking their own language, right? So when you have a financial forecast, it's usually the executives are just like, okay, we made $1 million last year, let's shoot for 1.5 this year, and it's very top line, financial oriented. When you're looking at a sales team forecast, they're looking more at the customer level. Like, okay, we have Walmart, Costco, we're going to try and bring in another 3 or 4 customers. And so they're speaking at kind of like a middle customer level. It's not as aggregated as the financial level. And then when you look at operations and marketing, sometimes you're talking all the way down to the product, if not line time and labor level. So everybody's speaking these different languages, and no one's really translating the message between all of them. And that's basically where people like me come in.
So when you come in, what are the guiding principles you swear by to ensure your clients reach their biggest goals?
Well, first thing is clarity. Like I'm sure as a leader yourself, a lot of times people will have goals and expectations, but they're not really clear on what the actual goal is, what their intent is, right? Like sometimes they'll be looking for a campaign or a customer they want to sign, and they haven't even ran the numbers to see if that's going to be a profitable business. They just know, oh, we want to be in that retail store. So a lot of it is just clarity with leadership on what are we actually trying to do, especially when you deal with the smaller brands. There's always this conversation of like, are you trying to build a brand? Are you trying to build something that you can leave to your kids? Are you trying to build something you can exit in a few years? Like every goal is going to have a different strategy behind it. So it's really just creating clarity around what the business goals are. And, in economics, there's a thing called the 80-20 rule. I don't know if you're familiar with that rule, but that's basically what I live and die by with my clients and myself including. So it's like, what are all the goals? Okay, what are the priorities? What are the things we're trying to execute? But what are the business critical ones? You have this many products. Which are the ones driving the business? And it's basically just shifting through the noise so that there's more clarity, so that as we make decisions, we know what decisions we're making and what we're actually trying to do.
Excellent. So, how can we help you out? What are the telltale signs a company is primed for your help? How can leaders know they need a CPG advisor in their corner so we can send you the companies we know who need you?
Yeah, so the brands I typically work with are usually between that $5 to $50 million range. Even though I do some sub 5 million, I do a lot of Shark Tank brands. You mentioned Shark Tank. The telltale sign and the problem I'm ultimately solving is if you have a bunch of stockouts. So if people are always trying to order product from you, you're always out of stock. That's probably the biggest sign that you need someone like me. And then the secondary sign would be, again, the excess. If you're selling X amount of product and you have 3, 4, 5 months of sitting in a warehouse and you don't know what to do with it, that's probably a sign. Those are usually symptoms of other causes. So obviously I would come and look at the root cause and be preventative so that that stuff doesn't happen again.
Entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. What's your best advice for those just starting out on this wild journey?
I mean, I'm a big component of if you want to be successful in life, you're going to work your ass off one way or the other. So you might as well do it in something that you love and you're passionate about and you believe in than something you don't. And that's really it. I think at the end of the day, and this is why I do what I do. Everybody has you can call it a gift, you could call it a skill set, you could call it a passion, whatever you want to call it. But you have something that you're really good at that other people aren't. Like I'll tell clients, I was like, what do people come to you for ultimately? It's all taking that skill set, that gift, or whatever it is you want to call it, becoming a master of your craft, and then serving people with it. To me, that's the ultimate journey of an entrepreneur: is finding what you're really good at, becoming really good at it, and then serving people with it. And have fun at the end of the day. There's no point in working for yourself if you're going to hold the stress that you would if you could work for a company, make the same money, and go home and sleep well at night.
I love it. So you've worked the complexities of supply chains and people management. Besides communication, which is important, what's one major lesson in leadership you've learned from all the things you've done?
I mean, I guess it would be the other side of the communication, which we spoke about earlier, which is the execution. A lot of times people could get in a room, they could communicate with each other, they could be working together, they could have a clear plan, a clear idea, and then everybody leaves that meeting and it just kind of falls down the crack. Like no one's executing, no one's following through, no one's keeping updates. So it's talking the talk, but then also walking the walk, like understanding now that we're all on the same page. Now this is when the work has to get done, and then going out and actually doing the work.
I've seen that happen too many times, even in the Air Force when I was of being in a meeting, everyone agreeing on what needs to get done, and then going off and doing totally different things. So that pain exists everywhere, even with our best and brightest wearing uniforms. With so much economic uncertainty.
I don't want to date the episode, but I know we just had Veterans Day, so I just wanted to thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you for your support. Yeah, it's we always appreciate the support from the community and our friends and families, and it's not the reason a lot of us get into the military, but it's certainly appreciated as the years go by. So with so much economic uncertainty right now, what's the number one thing we should all be preparing for in our supply chains if our businesses are affected by them?
So the first thing I'll say is there's always uncertainty. And so like any process, like any formula, you want to put uncertainty in the kind of modeling. I will say, I think things are going to get a lot better. I think, prices will start coming down as we kind of flush out the stuff that happened from COVID and things like that. A lot of that, like there's some commodities that are just falling off. Like milk right now is just falling off a cliff. It's super cheap. But again, that's not a long-term strategy because that stuff fluctuates. It goes up and down, up and down. But again, it goes back to playing the defense, where it's most of the risk that's built in to the system we know about. There's very few things that are not known about in the supply chain, and even things like COVID. So people will say things like COVID was so unexpected. We didn't have, our supply chain got screwed up. We weren't planning for it. But the truth is, anybody that's watched history knows that something major happens every 5 to 7 years. It might not be to the extent of COVID, but sometimes you have ports on strike for months at a time, weeks at a time. I remember in Europe there was a volcano that went off where we couldn't get any of our stuff from overseas because the planes couldn't fly out. Again, port strikes are almost like a reoccurring thing, like every 3 to 5 years. Long Beach port strikes. So there's always something major that happens every 3 to 5 years. It's like the economy, right? The economy has ups and downs, recession. It's the same thing when it comes to things like supply chain. So it's, again, having the offense when times are good and taking advantage of it, but then having that supply chain that's nimble enough to pivot and at least protect itself when times are bad. And that's the defensive part of playing games. That's the execution plus the strategy part.
Well, it sounds like we should all be taking some lessons from history and looking at and feeling and understanding the rhythms of how things work in the economy.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's take a break from these serious questions. Let's play a game. This game is called Rapid Response. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a series of questions, and you're going to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Now, you don't have to give a one-word answer. You can give some explanation. You can give a one-word answer if you want. We could be really rapid if you want, but feel free to elaborate on these questions as much or as little as you want. So, first thing that comes to your mind with these questions, all right? Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Walid Nasserdeen, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
Beside the Jason LeDuc Leadership Consulting Show, probably there's a show called CPG Vibes, which is a really good one if you're in the CPG industry. It usually brings on a lot of owners from like Shark Tank brands, smaller brands. It's cool just to hear, the stories of how they started.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm very flattered. I'm glad you gave us a different one for our viewers to check out. The metric every business should track.
Oh, wow, there's so many. Depending on the business, I would always start with, obviously, margins, profitability, cash flow, anything that has to do with, financial health. If you're a service-based business, a lot of times it's neglected, but I always look at like retention rates, referral rates, how many of your clients are actually coming back is usually a good sign for most businesses. So that's my favorite.
Concur. Someone we should all be watching.
Somebody we should all be watching. Oh, wow. Elon Musk, I guess.
I think plenty of us are already paying attention to him, but I think we're going to see a lot more of the things he's going to do. So I think that's probably a good choice. He's going to be influential, to say the least, over the coming years.
Yeah, he seems to be getting a lot more political too, which is interesting. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how all that works out. Okay, you get a choice here, so don't answer yet. What is your go-to song to get pumped up, or your walk-on music?
There's a song. It's a very old rap song called "Remember the Name," and actually that was my alarm for a few years that I would wake up to.
Outstanding. The biggest influence in your life?
Probably my parents. I won't get too deep.
A book everyone should read?
Richest Man in Babylon is one of my favorites.
Okay. Best thing about autumn in Las Vegas?
I'm fairly new to Vegas. I've been here about a year. I'm trying to remember what autumn was like. I don't know, to be honest. I'll have to pay attention this autumn.
All right. Well, we'll check back with you after the fall is over. We'll check back with you and see what your answer is. What was the best thing from this fall? What's your next vacation spot?
Honestly, I'm not a big vacation guy. I don't I don't believe in vacations. I'm not a big one. I do a lot of staycations, so I like I'm in Vegas right now. I like to go to Vegas and grab a room during the weekday and just relax. But I'll be in California for most of the holidays, so I'll probably look forward to spending a couple days in either Orange County or San Diego.
Okay. Well, maybe your best thing about the fall in Las Vegas is that it's a great staycation spot.
That's true.
What is an industry trend flying under the radar right now?
An industry trend. I would say the fractional operations space. That's kind of the space I'm trying to expand with the operations. I think more and more companies will start to outsource things, um, do the fractional modeling. You can call them entrepreneurs, but independent contracting work. I think that's a big field that's, especially as AI is rolling out and people could, build entire ecosystems around one or two people. You'll start getting these boutique fractional firms that start expanding.
Yeah, we're in the business, so we've heard of that term, and we know people doing that kind of stuff. But I think that's going to blow up a lot, or that's going to be the alternative a lot of companies choose to get them through the next few years to find solutions.
Yeah.
Your favorite sports team?
Even though I'm not a big sports guy, I'm a former Cali and now Vegas, so I'm going to go with the Raiders.
All right. Well, thank you for playing our game. Thank you for being a good sport. Let us get to know you a little bit in a way we might not from the other kinds of questions. So, to get back to that, as you talked about, uncertainty is constant. So, how can leaders future-proof their teams for a world of endless change?
To the extent that you can, which I don't think you really can, um, it does come down to just building a really deep bench of really good players, making sure that the people you have, and this kind of comes back to the communication versus the execution. If you have a solid group of people who all know their jobs, they have a very clear line of what their responsibilities for, and they're set up for success both, within the company and then the skills that they have to actually execute. And then you align all those people together and get them communicating. That's probably the best way to, future risk protect your business on whatever situation comes.
Love to hear that we can build a great team and do more with people to solve the challenges coming up. But we also, we have a lot of technology, and AI is getting into things in a big way. How are you bringing technology and AI into the work you do, and what's the impact you're seeing from that?
Yeah, I have a hate love relationship with AI, especially as someone who's always been in the data analytic fields. There's always been this push towards like ERP systems and forecasting systems and management, which really just aren't that good. It's always going to come back to, especially when you're talking about data, the quality of the information going in is going to be the quality of the information coming out. And so a lot of companies, even if you have robust systems, AI, the data they have, it just isn't clean. So it's kind of a crapshoot. But I think AI is going to be great in, I guess the way I put it, it's not going to replace anybody. It's going to complement the people that are already doing what they do. So, AI art is a big thing. If I take AI art and I do something, it'll be pretty cool. But if you give it to an artist, they're going to wipe the floor with me. So, again, it comes back to the speaking the language. Like the AI isn't going to replace. Uh, I kind of equated to like, remember when we were in school and you would have some teachers that would do the grading curve. So like you got a C, but they would give you a B. You got a B. But to me, that's what AI is. It's going to make all the good people better. It's going to make all the best the best. It's going to make the okay a little above the average. It's going to just push everybody up one notch. But I'm excited to see what it does. It's really interesting. I've saved clients thousands of dollars just using basic chat GPT in ways that you wouldn't even think about. Like I had a client that has a warehouse. They were going to put barcodes on all the stuff, scan codes, and they got a quote for a couple $1,000s to create the barcodes. I basically took their entire product list, ran it through ChatGPT, and said, "Make me barcodes," and it literally just shot out a bunch of barcodes on a Word document, and then we just printed them out.
Fantastic. I'm I'm always I'm always impressed by the things that people come up with to use with ChatGPT or whatever your favorite AI model is. Like I hadn't heard about the barcode thing, but that's a great experiment. And if it didn't work, who cares? It was a couple minutes worth of ChatGPT chunking on it for you, right? So going back to people, what's the X factor you look for in emerging leaders? What qualities make someone stand out to you?
Um, so I have this thing I call it the CEO of leadership, and it's basically the three pillars that I look for in leaders, and I try and instill myself. And it's basically communication, execution, and then ownership. And so, someone who has the ability to communicate, that's great. But again, you have to have the ability to execute. And at the end of the day, you have to take ownership of whatever you're doing, whether it's the team you build, the process you put, the products. Like, it's very hard and rare to find people that just take 100% ownership of everything. And, you mentioned books. The Jocko Willink Extreme Ownership is one of my favorites as well. I think just more people taking responsibility and ownership. And then when you have a team of everybody taking ownership, that collaboration, that working together is just, it's unstoppable.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with Jocko Willing about the extreme ownership. The whole idea of accountability is something they reinforce in us in the military from day one, and it's interesting to see how that's not necessarily the case out in the civilian world, and we need to bring that lesson out sometimes. So, besides communication, execution, ownership, if you could instantly grant every leader one skill, what would it be, and why is it critical for success?
So, while it's not necessarily a skill, I would say just the general wanting to know. Like the thing that's made me the most success is just a fascination for wanting to see how things work. And so when I see something at surface level, oh, how does this work? How does that work? Why is this happening? So I would say the ability to ask the right questions and actually have a curiosity of like how things work, why things work. In problem solving, we just call it, root cause analysis. That's kind of like a consequence of that, where you see something, you drill down, you drill down, you drill down, and you realize that there's variables and there's outcomes, but there's things that are dependent on those. And being that person that can see what the principle is, the root cause, asking those questions and drilling down, I think is an amazing skill set.
Yeah, curiosity is a skill that is not taught easily. And it's something I'm always encouraging my clients. And when I teach workshops, I'm always encouraging people to foster your curiosity, do things to ask yourself more about why and how and what's really going on here. And it's something that we all need to re-engage ourselves on. Of, am I being curious about this? Am I really getting down to everything that's going on? What are the questions I can ask even a little bit more? What's one more question I can ask to try to learn more about this?
Yeah, and it's not even just the curiosity; it's the curiosity in combination with the focus, right? Because a lot of times some people get too curious and they're all over the place and they're forgetting again what their original goal was. The way I like to approach problem solving is very mathematical. So I don't remember if you were in school, but the first thing we would ever do when we solved a problem in school, math problem, is you would look at the problem and you would like, okay, what is the actual thing we're solving for? Like they might give you a big crazy problem that you don't even know what they're trying to ask you, and you got to delineate what are they actually asking us for. So you basically look at the problem, like, what are they actually asking us for? And you would, on the paper, you would write down what the givens are. Here's the given. Here's what we know. And then based on the givens, you would have to dissect what was actually applicable to the question and what wasn't. Sometimes you get a math question, they put stuff in the sentence that had nothing to do with the problem they were trying to solve. So it's like understanding what you're actually trying to solve, what information you're given, and then what information that you're given is actually relevant to what you're trying to solve, and doing that matching game. and then going in and drilling down and solving the problem.
That's exactly how they taught us how to do it in engineering school. And as a young engineering student, you go, I don't need to do that. I don't need to write all that stuff down. And then by the time you're done with engineering school, you're pretty much doing that for everything. And that's how I approach every problem I try to solve. Is what do I know? Let's go from there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, 2024 is almost over. What's one thing you're going to accomplish before the year is out? And what's your big goal for 2025?
My goal for 2024 is spend a little more time with family. The holidays are coming up, so that's a nice time to do that. My brother's expecting his second child in a couple weeks.
Congratulations.
So Thanksgiving, thank you. Thanksgiving and Christmas in California. So that's really my goal right now for this year is just take the foot off the gas a little bit with the business, help my clients through Black Friday, and then take a break and spend time with family. And 2025, I'm trying to probably double the size of my consulting practice. Um, it's a very new field in the sense that, again, it's not fractional operations that doesn't really, there's a lot of education that I need to kind of get out around what I'm doing. So I'm excited about that, though.
Well, it sounds great. I've met some of your family. They're delightful. I hope you have a great time. I'm sure Black Friday is going to be the 2 or 3 weeks we've got till that will be intense for you, but I know you'll get through it. What's the best mistake you've ever made that ended up being a complete game changer?
Wow. Okay. I hate calling it a mistake because it was such a game changer. It was such a blessing in my career. But when I started from school, when I left college with my finance degree, I went into analytics. So my background was financial analytics. And I had a great job. It was an automotive holding company. I was kind of doing what I kind of do now, like just building processes, building reports, building strategy, working with the CEO to build his business. But I was in my 20s and, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I had the opportunity to go to Wall Street. So I went to Wall Street, Merrill Lynch, Analytics, New York, and I had a great time. Like it was an amazing experience, but it just didn't really align with my character. The reason I fell so in love with operations and supply chain is because I actually only work with companies that build physical products. There's just something about a company that makes a real product and isn't just like on the internet or a website or something like that. So I have an affinity for like product-based businesses. And I learned that on Wall Street because on Wall Street, super successful, great. It was a lot of fun, great for the ego. Trump building 40 Wall Street next to the New York Stock Exchange. But it was just all smoke and mirrors on a computer, like just numbers on a screen going back and forth. So you never saw a finished product. So when I got into operations, my first company was an ice cream company. I went in as a finance guy and I worked as an operations guy. And it was fascinating to just, watch these ice cream, the milk turn into the product, and then you got a finished product, and then you go and you see it on the shelf at Walmart. It was just a great experience. So
yeah, there's nothing better than being able to point at something and say, I helped make that.
Yeah, I used to get kicked out of Walmart because I would go and I would see my client's product there, and they would be like not stocked properly, or it'd be like backgrounds, and I would like literally empty the shelf and like restock it so it looked good, and they'd be like, "Get out of here."
Now that is dedication to your company, is to go into a Walmart and restock the shelves the way they should be stocked, exactly, instead of the way Walmart stocked them. That is dedication.
Well, that's the ownership. That's the pride part of why we do what we do.
I love it. What's the one leadership trend you're seeing that no one is talking about, but everyone should be?
Listening skills. I think people have this inherent belief that the leader is always the guy in the front of the room giving orders. And sometimes it's the guy in the back of the room just listening and observing and paying attention to things. And I think that's a very underdeveloped skill with most people. And it's a very, it's usually not appreciated, but it's definitely a key skill to have.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny because I've been, between military stuff and consulting stuff, doing leadership for 30-ish years now. And that comes up almost every conversation. We need to listen more, and we need to do more to encourage the quiet people to speak up a little bit, because they always have the best ideas, right? So it's amazing how some things never change.
Yeah. That was a big problem with me when I was younger. I was very, like, I actually went through high school with people thinking I was a mute. I did not speak at all. I was very reserved, very quiet. And I had a professor basically just tell me, like, do you want to be a leader in your industry? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. He's like, well, the ideas in your head aren't going to just jump out and, you're not, whatever they call it, like, they're not going to read your mind. So if you want to be a leader, the knowledge you have is you need to be able to communicate to people. You need to be able to express yourself and talk to people and communicate. And then that's, he was right. But then you have the other side where, especially when you get into work like operations and analytics, you always want people to, and it's an ego thing. Everybody has it. I notice it across all the clients and all my coworkers. Is you always want people to know how much work you put into things, right? So you do this project, and then, like you said, you had an engineering background, and the analyst will go through all these numbers and like a 30-page presentation of how they got the answer. But the executive's like, I don't think like this. I just give me the problem and the solution, 3 options, and what we're going to do, right? So it's like it's that understanding of like you did all the work, but you don't need to sit there and show it off all the time. You just need to present the solution and what you're trying to do. And then them trusting that solution should be validation enough. Like they took my recommendation, they took my solution, and now I'm the guy that gets to execute on it. And then that's it. You don't always have to show how smart you are or how much work you did.
Yeah, that was the lesson I had to learn in the Air Force of it's important to be able to show your work if you need to, but more importantly is you need to be able to get to that solution for a decision maker and tell them what that means in terms of the big picture of the goals of the organization. That was a hard lesson that I had to learn in my day. But yeah, you've got to be able to talk, not just do the work, but talk about what it means.
Absolutely.
You've got a couple of busy weeks coming up getting your clients ready for Black Friday, and I think there might be some times when that gets a little stressful for you. How do you stay calm when adversity hits? What's your advice for leading under pressure when the stakes are high?
Honestly, my nature itself is pretty chilled. I'm pretty low energy, pretty relaxed. I've been known to actually say to people, we're not soldiers. We're not in the military. We don't have bullets flying at us. Like, relax, calm down. And this isn't a life or death situation. Everything will be fine. But it just comes down to the planning part. It's if you plan properly, because the truth is, most brands right now, it's kind of too late to prepare for Black Friday. Like, I'm trying to get my clients to prepare for Chinese New Year's, because when the Q1 comes, if they're getting their stuff from China and China's shut down for Chinese New Year's, we're gonna have a problem. So right now, depending on what your supply chain looks like and how your lead times, um, like for Mattel, I, I used to work at Mattel. I used to run the Barbie brand operation, on the planning side. And with Mattel, it would be this kind of balance where Christmas is the biggest season for us, right? We're toys. And what would happen is uh, you're also a public company, which means you're ending the year. And if you have too much excess, you're screwed. And if you miss sales because of Christmas, you're screwed. It's a Wall Street company. They'll hurt your price per share. But with all that said, Mattel takes the last 2 weeks of the year off. They close the office because they understand that all the planning is pretty much done before you even get to that point. Um, so it's in the planning part. It's always being the proactive planning part that's always going to save you.
All right. So what's keeping you up at night? What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now, and how are you tackling it?
Bro, I sleep like a baby, to be honest. But I mean, personally, it's probably just I kind of made a pact with myself back in the day that I never wanted to work for myself, that I never wanted to just own my own business. And I've been fighting over the last year with myself on doing that. I've been consulting for the last 4 or 5 years, but it's been a side hustle. I've always had a corporate career and an executive title. And it's just been in the last year when I moved to Vegas that I've kind of only been a consultant. And I've been wrestling with the idea of whether I want to keep that or go back to have a corporate executive title. And I've kind of come to the conclusion I want to build my business out. And so I'm just really excited about that and what that means. But again, there's going to be a lot of education around it because it's kind of a blue ocean that I'm playing in that not a lot of people are. But yeah, that's. I wouldn't say it keeps me up in a bad way, but I go to bed and I wake up excited about what I'm doing right now.
Well, it's great to wake up excited. What is something else you're excited about for the future of business and the workplace in general?
Probably most people like the AI. I'm really excited to see what that looks like. I think what a lot of people think it looks like now isn't what it's going to end up being. So I'm curious to see what that actually looks like as it executes and as it rolls out and gets into companies.
What's your best advice for up and coming leaders, whether they want a job in corporate or to go into entrepreneurship? What's your best advice for them to be successful in the future?
Yeah, so there's actually an equation for, they call it the income equation, which is how much money you can make. And it's something I always default back to, whether it's myself or clients or people I'm mentoring. And the equation goes the value you bring, which is what you do and how well you do it, the need for what you do, and the difficulty in replacing you. And most people, I mean, it's pretty common sense, but most people will forget about like the need part or the difficulty in replacing. So take a haircut, find a person who needs what you do. Be a good barber. Find a person who needs it. But then also, are you difficult to replace? So what's that differentiating factor? And so what I like to use is the term multidimensional person. And usually what will set you apart and that difficulty to replace is being that person like we've been talking about before, which maybe has the analytical skills and the communication skills and the executional skills and leadership skills. So just don't be a one-dimensional person. A lot of accountants are just accountants. A lot of analysts are just analysts. So it's being that person that could, communicate across the supply chain up and down to leaders to subordinates. But that's really it. Just being really good at what you do, finding the people that you could serve that need what you do, and then giving that differentiating kind of factor.
That is fantastic advice, and that's an amazing place to leave it. Tell everybody where they can reach you.
So Walid Nasserdeen across most platforms, most active on LinkedIn and Instagram socially. And then W.NDeen Advisory is my website.
And we'll link all that up in the show notes, so all you guys have to do is point and click instead of remember all that. Walid, thanks so much for joining us today. To everyone watching, if you found this conversation valuable, first, thank Walid for joining us. Then go ahead and share it, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got lots more amazing leaders coming your way, so keep watching, keep developing your leader's mindset. Go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.